Hi there and welcome. Jonathan here. These talks are offered freely so that no one is ever denied access to these practices. Your support makes a big difference. If you feel inspired to make a donation, please go to jonathanfoust.com. Thank you. A Michigan woman and her family were vacationing in a small New England town where Paul Newman often visited. One Sunday morning, the woman got up early to take a long walk. After a brisk 5-mile hike, she decided to treat herself to a double-dip chocolate ice cream cone. She hopped in the car, drove to the center of the village, and went straight to the combination bakery ice cream parlor. There was only one other patron in the store, Paul Newman. He was sitting at the counter and having a donut and coffee. And the woman's heart skipped a beat as her eyes made contact with those famous baby blue eyes. The actor nodded graciously, and the starstruck woman smiled demurely. "Pull yourself together," she chided herself. "You're a happily married woman with 3 children. You're 45 years old, not a teenager." The clerk filled her order, and she took the double-dip chocolate ice cream cone in one hand and her change in the other. Then she went out the door, avoiding even a glance in Paul Newman's direction. When she reached her car, she realized that she had a handful of change, but her other hand was empty. "Where's my ice cream cone? Did I leave it in the store?" Back into the shop she went, expecting to see the cone still in the clerk's hand or in a holder on the counter or something. But no ice cream cone was in sight. With that, she happened to look over at Paul Newman. His face broke into his familiar, warm, friendly grin, and he said to the woman, "You put it in your purse." So the title for this talk is Skillful Awareness. This is the 7th talk on the Eightfold Path. One more to go. And we think of a path as a means of getting somewhere. And the Eightfold Path, or the observances, the practices outlined by the Buddha to cultivate liberation or improving the quality of your life. So there's a sense that a path, gets you from here to there, from point A to point B. But paradoxically, it's an inner path. And it's a path that takes you to freedom, but it's also taking you to something that's already latent inside, that's already here. When you think of that you want to be happy, is it not true that happiness is already here? It's a question of discovering what's already present. So the path, you could say, is one that frees you from 3 major forces. It frees you from greed and the suffering that greed creates. It frees you from hatred and aversion and the suffering that creates. And it frees you from delusion. And delusion is simply believing something's true when it's not, or believing something is true when it really isn't. So, skillful awareness or skillful mindfulness. I've gone on rants about the word mindfulness. It's always bugged me because there's no mind in mindfulness. The best way I can describe it is present moment, non-judging awareness. So when you're practicing meditation, there are these moments where you are perfectly here in the absence of judgment. That is a moment or a millisecond of freedom right there. So the word sati, the breath-based meditation we do, is called anapanasati. And the word sati means to remember or memory. So it's that remembering to come back to the present moment and open to a sense of non-judging awareness. The more we do that, the more we tend to direct the mind in that, toward that. The analogy, one of the best analogies I love, is when you see someone who's dyeing a fabric with indigo, the deep blue indigo. They start with a white fabric and they dip it into this, blue, almost purple dye. They take it out, hang it up to dry, and that beautiful blue fabric goes almost bone white again. So they take the fabric, they dip it again, they hang it up to dry, and again it goes almost white, but it takes on a very, very subtle hue of the blue. The more you dip the fabric, the more the dye will begin to infuse itself into the fabric. It's in that same way when you bring yourself into non-judging present moment awareness, the more you do it, the more the mind, the more consciousness takes on that quality, takes on the hue of non-judging presence. So the path is about the different explorations, the different ways you can direct your attention that support you in cultivating that sense of presence. Sometimes we think of meditation as one-pointed awareness, so it's just being concentrated. And that could be a helpful thing. But one-pointed awareness is not necessarily the answer. There are millions of people who devote one-pointed awareness to their television sets who are not necessarily fully awakened beings. So it's more a question of where you pay attention and how you pay attention. So there are 4 particular areas the Buddha outlined where when you pay attention on these 4 different areas, you can begin to see into the nature of reality. The first is paying attention to the body itself, to the energy in the body. The second is to pay attention to the feeling or the feeling tone of your body. The third is to pay attention to the mind states that arise out of the body, the qualities of mind. And the fourth is referred to as paying attention to the dhammas or the truth of what is here. So there's the body, feeling, the thought forms, and then what is true in all of that arising. So first, the body. There is a kind of a classical story of a monk in the Buddha's day who was dying. His body was literally falling apart. And it looked horrendous. And yet he had a radiance about him. And he was visited by a number of monks who were appalled at what they saw. And yet they were struck by his peace and his serenity. And they asked him, what are you doing that is allowing you to radiate such a sense of peace? And he repeated back the Buddha's instruction for being aware of the body. And this is what the Buddha said. Remain focused on the body in and of itself, ardent, aware, and mindful, putting away greed and distress with reference to the world. Just to repeat that. Remain focused on the body in and of itself, so absorbed in the sensations in the body, ardent, staying focused, aware, and mindful, non-judging. So you're present, you're aware, the non-judging, and you put away greed and distress in reference to the world. Sometimes I can do that. And I've noticed when I'm in a lot of physical pain, when I'm struck with a migraine, I notice how I start hallucinating about what a terrible day is going to be tomorrow, or how horrible it is that I'm falling back on email, that all of my reference to the world just spins me up into distress. But when I can just be with the sensations, really focused and aware without judging, it's actually bearable. I can actually be with it. So there's a very clear distinction in our practice between cognitive awareness, like being aware of your story or your hallucination, if you will, and being aware of what's actually happening in your body. Big difference. And there's a real art to it, particularly when you're in physical pain. Is it possible just to bring yourself in this moment to moment to moment awareness of what's happening? So let's try this for 90 seconds. You can close your eyes. And I'd like to invite you to bring your attention to an anchor. It might be to the movement of your breath. You might tune in to the vibration of sound. Maybe the feeling in the palms and fingers and thumbs. And for the next minute, let yourself explore these instructions. Be focused on the body, ardent, aware, and non-judging, putting away greed and distress with reference to the world. And now deepening your breath. And if you like, you can let your eyes open, or feel free to remain with them closed if that's more comfortable. Simple instructions, not so easy. The narrative interjects all the time. But with practice, we can sustain attention sometimes for a period of time in the body, in and of itself. This is such a critical part of the practice. It's about learning how to turn from your story to the experience of here and now. The body houses your suffering as well as your capacity for joy and happiness. You can have a closed fist that's full of tension, and you can have an open palm, which is relaxed and receiving. The Buddha taught that everything you want to know about the universe can be discovered in your body. Everything. So the invitation in our practice is to plunge into the body, to keep coming back to the experience, the moment-to-moment experience of what's happening energetically inside. And it can be very, very hard. You're really paying your dues when you do this. However, the benefit is fantastic. Even when you have a meditation where you're just struggling to even contact the body, it has a very powerful way of kind of bleeding into the rest of your life. So when we practice breath-based meditation, or using sound, or using the felt sense of the body, when you focus on the body, it helps to train and stabilize your mind in a very high-quality way. The body holds a lot of information. You may have heard the phrase, it says, your issues are in your tissues. You know? Every emotion, every belief, every thought resides in the body. All of your held trauma, all of your joyful memories, they're all in here. So the body is the foundation of our practice. It's what you return to. However, when you're in that moment-to-moment experience of your body, inevitably you'll notice something arises out of those sensations. And this leads us to the second foundation of awareness, and that is the feeling tone that arises from your body. So why is this so important? Again, this can be a wonderful tool for freeing the habitual ways that you get caught in your life. I had mentioned last week that I was flying up to lead a weekend retreat at Bowdoin College, which was a blast. It was an amazing experience to be up there with such good people, with faculty and students and local folks. And in my ongoing relationship with TSA, I have more to report. So on my way back, I got a ride to the airport pretty soon after our closing morning and a little Q&A discussion session. And I had these hours to work on this talk and do a few other things. So I was feeling really good about having this space in front of me. And the Portland airport has this one little area with these really, really comfortable sofas. It's like being in a living room. And it's just really nice because those other airport chairs just don't work with the length of my body. So I was walking up to TSA, and I couldn't get the app open on my phone. And so as I'm getting closer and closer, I could feel myself getting tense. Now, the feeling tone, or what's called Vedana in Pali, is how the energy in your body, before you even know it, it'll form into one of three possibilities. The energy will form into energy that feels unpleasant. It'll form into energy that feels pleasant. Or it'll form into an experience that is neutral. It's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. But all this energy all filters through these three possibilities. So as I'm getting closer and I'm fumbling with my iPhone, I couldn't get it open. Unpleasant. I could feel the unpleasant. And then I found it just in time, and I saw that I was designated as TSA pre-check. I could keep my shoes on. Pleasant. So as I walked up to the screening area, there was this serious-looking guy who came over, and he asked me about this long stick sticking in my pack, which was my bamboo flute. I saw him looking at it like, what kind of deadly instrument is that? Unpleasant. So I told him it was a bamboo meditation flute. Really unpleasant. He asked me if it worked. More unpleasant. I didn't understand the question. And he said, well, does it get you meditative? He was joking. Pleasant. And I said, sometimes it does. More pleasant. So as I went on, I put my coat down on the conveyor belt. It was neutral. Nothing special. But then another TSA person said, take that thing and put that thing behind. And I was like, unpleasant. And then she looked at me and said, take that thing, put that thing behind. Like, what are you saying? Paranoia, unpleasant. And then finally I understood that I was supposed to take a little tray and put it behind my coat to push it through. So as I walked through, I apologized for not understanding her, and she smiled. Pleasant. That's how life works. When you really pay attention, there's this contraction expansion all the time. And it becomes a very, very interesting way to pay attention to your life experience. To notice when you contract, and notice when you expand, and notice when it's neutral. I had mentioned before a teacher by the name of U Tejaniya, that when you study with him, his instructions are not so much about how long you sit or how long you walk, but it's all about Vedana. 24/7, you zoom in on that experience of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. And you begin to notice how you're constantly reacting to the moment. 1 minute practice. If you like, you can close your eyes. You can again come back to your anchor. And with this sense of non-judging awareness, just track whatever might come through your mind, what might come through your body, and notice if you can detect some quality here of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. So you may notice how sensations or thoughts arise, and there may be a very subtle noting of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, and then noting the inner reaction to that. And again, when you're ready, you can open your eyes or remain with them closed. So as your energetic experience comes into the form of unpleasant, pleasant, or neutral, when you're not aware, you will react. Unpleasant, nuke it. Make it go away. Pleasant, strategize on how to keep it or make it bigger. Neutral, boredom. Every experience is tinged with this quality of pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, and it leads very quickly to the next foundation, which are the thought forms, the story that you build on pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And it becomes a very interesting place to pay attention. Someone was telling me this weekend how they were on retreat and they kept falling asleep. And she kept thinking to herself, well, what does this mean? What am I avoiding? Is there some like deeper pattern coming up in my life that I'm trying to numb out? I always check out when things get tough. And then later she thought, what if I just trusted the feeling and took a nap? And that worked. So we show up for our experience in the body. And then we notice the flavor that arises. We notice how we're relating or reacting to what arises out of the moment. So back to the Portland airport. So I had plenty of time. I got a place on one of the sofas, incredibly comfortable. And as I was working, I glanced up at the departure screen, and I saw there was a flight to Washington that was like an hour and a half earlier than I was scheduled to go. And I thought, I wonder if I could get on that flight. So I wandered down to the gate, and they said, well, we can put you on standby, but you're going to be charged $75 to make the switch. I said, you're telling me even if there's an empty seat, you're going to charge me $75? So I've had a credit card with this airline for 25 years, frequent flyer, and she said, it's the policy and we can't do anything about it. Unpleasant. And then I noticed how that unpleasant went right into a thought form. And the thought form was, these are evil corporate people. But then I noticed that the person behind the desk who was telling me this looked kind of pained at having to tell me that. And then I softened. Pleasant. And I thought, this is actually a really nice person. So then I weighed, is it worth $75 to change my flight? And I thought, no. So I went back to my sofa and had a great couple hours and felt good about my decision. So when you reflect back over this day, from the moment you woke up, all the people you encountered, all you've done today, how many times do you think you contracted and expanded? And can you sense how many times those sensations in the body immediately went to thought forms? This is where we can really free ourselves. We are a mind-body matrix. The body doesn't exist without the mind. The mind doesn't exist without the body. Thoughts and emotions are psychobiological events. They occur in the mind and they manifest in the body. When you are feeling greed, you can locate that inside. When you feel aversion, you can locate that inside. When you're feeling love and peace and well-being, you can locate that inside as well. So the mindfulness practice is kind of an information gathering process. When you relax and when you pay attention, and you can begin to hone your attention on these levels of what's happening energetically. What is the feeling tone of right now? And what are the thought forms that are just springing out of this feeling tone? And who am I as the observer of all of this? Which leads to the fourth foundation, which is the awareness of what is true. Seeing clearly into the nature of reality. So when I settled back in my sofa after getting the news from my corporate friends, I noticed that I felt some relief. And I recognized that I had been caught. I was attached to the idea of getting an earlier flight. I was deeply aversive to the fact that despite I'd been a loyal customer, this corporate entity was going to hit me up for another $75. But I was also aware that I dropped it. And when I dropped it, I felt spaciousness. I felt relaxed. So this is really about noticing what's true. And it brings us back to the very beginning of the path, which is the whole foundation of this meditation practice. The fact that stress, unsteadiness, unsatisfactoriness, and suffering happen. They happen. There are times when you get caught. The second foundation, everything that has to do with stress and suffering has a cause. And that cause is attachment or clinging. Which leads us to the third, that it's possible to let go. That when you are aware you're holding on tight to the rope, it's possible to let go. And there are practices and awarenesses and observations and disciplines that will lead to more and more of a capacity for happiness, for realization, and for liberation. So the practice is about noticing where you get caught. noticing where you hold on, and noticing what helps you cultivate a sense of feeling open and free. And you begin to see into the causal relationships between your internal experience and how you're relating to what's arising, how you're relating to what's showing up. You begin to see all the ways that your personal brand of clinging leads to your suffering. And you also get to see the observances and the practices that allow you to let go and find freedom where it didn't exist before. So this level of the Dhammas, or seeing what's true, is really seeing very deeply into the nature of these thoughts. You begin to realize that so much of these reactive thoughts, over time you begin to say, you know what, they kind of fall into 5 categories. So there's the teaching of the hindrances, that some reactive thoughts, they fall into the category of aversion, anger, judgment, blame. Some reactive thoughts, they fall into the category of clinging, of wanting, planning, fantasy. Other collections of thoughts fall into the whole realm of worry and anxiety. Other collective thoughts fall into the category of sloth and torpor, of sort of density. And others are connected with doubt and with self-criticism. At that level where you can begin to recognize these categories of thoughts, as soon as you see them, you begin to change your relationship to them. It's the difference between being angry and being with your anger. You can allow it to flow through rather than grasping on so tightly. So what's exciting about the practice is there's an opportunity here, a possibility of mastery. It's an opportunity to learn about yourself, to really see deeply into the causes and conditions that have created your personality, to really see where you get caught, and to find your way to look at how you can free yourself. I had mentioned before how I did a long retreat with Tsoknyi Rinpoche in the Tibetan tradition, with a very particular set of practices. And I had a really powerful experience. And I asked him, I said, if I continue with these techniques, what can I expect? I thought it was a great ringer question for him. And he paused, and his answer surprised me. He said, confidence. You will develop, if you do this practice, you will develop the confidence where you will know you can be with anything. And I have found that to be true. These particular ways of paying attention can be so helpful. And why in this particular form of meditation practice, we're moving from the cognitive to the experience. We're moving from the mind to the body to come back to the intimate experience of the body. That moment-to-moment movement of the breath, or the vibration of sound, or the feeling in the body. That is the ground. When you rest there, there begins a process of unwinding. And what arises will flow up through this feeling tone. And if you can catch that feeling tone before it moves into a thought form, it's a powerful practice. When you can see the unpleasant and name the unpleasant and watch the thought form arise, you're seeing very deeply into a very powerful, perhaps subconscious, reactive pattern where you have been caught. There's just a possibility that that might not have the same grip on you as before. To recognize when you're lost in thought, that the sanctuary is to come back to the here and now. To recognize when you're gripped with a really strong emotion, to remember that that emotion is a psychobiological event. There's a story in your mind, but that emotion also lives on the inside. And when you can come back and contact that intimate presence and to examine the unpleasant, pleasant arising out of that, there is a way of attending to it that can be quite powerful. So the more that you can steep yourself in non-judging present moment awareness, the more you take on that quality. And as I like to say, the good news about this practice is that you become more sensitive. And the bad news, you become more sensitive. But the more you recognize that this is truly a path of freedom, that when you practice, what arises is an opportunity to see clearly into the nature of reality and to rest in that quality of presence. Next week, we're going to talk about the final of these, which is skillful concentration. That is, once you've cultivated this quality of non-judging awareness of the body, of feeling tone, of mind states, and seeing into the truth within what is arising, how do you apply your concentration? How do you focus your attention? And that is, we'll kind of complete this part of our exploration. But it's helpful to remember that this path, it's an inner path. And it always leads us to the possibility of presence right now. So on that note, why don't we close with a short meditation? As you feel the breath in these final minutes this evening, let your attention just come to contact the body. It might be through the anchor of breath or sound or the felt sense of the hands or just a general sense of the aliveness of your body. And let your attention rest here. Focused in the body in and of itself, aware, non-judging, putting away greed and distress with reference to the world. Notice the feeling tone in this moment, arising from the body, arising of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And notice how it's all happening by itself. Who you are is the awareness. Notice the quality of mind, the narrative that arises from this moment. Sensing in these final minutes everything that moves through the body and mind. And sensing who you are as awareness itself, the one who is aware, the one who knows. And gently now deepening your breath. And as you're ready, letting your eyes open. Thank you for your kind attention and your presence. A few quick announcements. I will be leading a day-long retreat here on the 30th. It's on the practice of inquiry. More about that in the newsletter. If you'd like to be on the newsletter and you're not, you can sign up in the back. As always, thank you for your generous support for the church and for myself. And I want to thank our volunteer for the sound. Thank you so much. As always, Bob, the pillar of our class. By the way, Bob is hug starved, so you might want to give him a hug on your way out. May you and your body, feeling tone, mind states, and truth have a wonderful evening together. You might want to grab a cookie on the way out. Rita? Don't forget, awesome, amazing yoga offered at 6:30, from 6:30 to 7:10 every time. Thank you. Have a wonderful, wonderful week. Enjoy your cookie and everything else.